Welcome to lecture 6 from eBranding. This is positioning and marketing strategy. I'm going to consider two key areas today. The first is obviously positioning, looking at the definition, the history, the conceptual development of from product to corporate positioning, and finally positioning theory to help you build that up with your brand. And the second part is going to look at marketing strategy, so the definitions, the development, the 4 Ps, the trends, and obviously the impact of E or I marketing, and finally some summary and some further reading. So let's start off with our positioning strategy. So positioning has been receiving a lot of attention in recent decades from the practitioners and researchers alike. The concept's become gradually associated with brand building. So there's been this sort of critical strategy in the brand management as a means of differentiating those brands from competitors, and also to help ensure that those brands are relevant and consistent within the marketplace. The definitions have been involved in conjunction with the sort of conceptual development of the positioning theory. So we started off very much with a product perspective, where the definition from Rees and Trout shows that positioning is not what you do with a product. Positioning is what you do to the mind of the prospect. That is, you position the product in the mind of the prospect. By 1990s, 2000, we were talking this from a brand perspective. And in this Marsden definition shows this, where positioning may be simply defined in terms of how the brand is positioned in the mind of the consumer with respect to the values with which it is differentially associated or which it owns. So, considering this definition, we're saying, well, the brand really is in the mind of the consumer. All the values, all the associations, the brand's not real unless the consumer believes it to be so. From a corporate brand perspective, the most recent, it's defined by in 2008 as the corporate brand positioning can be defined as the compass of the brand identity, directing the corporation to the place where it can leverage the most powerful positioning in the category in which it competes, and establishes a mostly powerful position within the lives of its potential consumers or customers. So this whole idea of the positioning is the compass of the brand identity. It shows where the brand identity should be directed and helps ensure that it is all very much on target for where the brand wishes to be. So let's look at the conceptual development. So it's went through some very distinct stages. The first is the mental associations, when studies are referring to the memory, the associations, the mechanisms of processing information. That goes back to Plato, before Christ. Second, we're talking about the unique selling point, that USP. And positioning was very much discussed as a USP, but this goes back to the 1960s, where a product must possess a unique proposition. Because there's so many products, so many brands out there, it's very difficult to ensure that a unique proposition is obtained and achieved, and also it can achieve longevity as well, which is a difficult part. Hence why we hear about repositioning on a frequent basis. That product positioning is the third. The product positioning studies tended to stress that importance of being distinctively positioned and differentiated from the competition. The unique product positioning helps assist the consumers to help them process that information and really ensure that there's a strong links to advertising with that as well. The concept then sort of evolved to becoming from product to brand positioning, and these really studies by Hooley, Ogilvy, Saunders, to name a few, there's many, many more, focus on moving from product positioning to brand positioning. And the 2000 papers around then, the research papers, really talk about brand positioning, and this stress the importance of positioning brands and or the means by which brands are positioned. And most recently, we are looking at corporate brand positioning, And this positioning studies tend to consider how the company is perceived and how the firm's distinctiveness from the competitors and or strategies to position that corporate brand. And there are multitudes of papers that consider this aspect as well. So what's the difference from product to corporate brand positioning? Well, from a product perspective, the basis is the competitive advantage of the product, the attributes that distinguish the brand among the competitors. In the corporate perspective, this identity is the important factor, and it leads the corporation to a position or repositioning where it can leverage that brand into its most powerful means. The drivers from a product perspective, the 4 Ps, from a corporate perspective, 4 elements of the organisation overall: the reputation, the product, the service performance, the product customer portfolio networks, and all of which the management is incorporated into supply chain. The functional dynamic is exhaustible resources from product perspective, and from a corporate it's very much an ongoing process. In the product dimension, it tends to be implemented by brand managers, and in the more corporate sphere, it is very much an entire corporation activity. The orientation is different. The target market is very much the strength within the product perspective, whereas from a corporate perspective, this tends to be a multiple stakeholder group, and that becomes strength. The offer from a product is the benefit delivery, the transactional orientated, whereas in the corporate, the value delivery, relationship networks orientated is the strength. In the outreach, it's a very much limited audience, and in terms of the corporate, it's a diluted audience is its weakness. The expenditures tend to be channeled in the short term within the corporate brand that is extensive and long term, which is a weakness. Purpose is very much about boosting sales. The purpose in a corporate brand is long-term consistent sales growth. The message from the product realm is the multiple but very specific strength, and the message from the corporate is one that's very broad. The message developers might tend to be marketing departments. The message developers in the corporate brand are CEO and top management. And finally, strategic planning is very much product-centred, and from a corporate perspective, identity and product-centred is key. So obviously, for the brands that we've been developing, talking about, identity is absolutely key. So we're moving towards this corporate brand, this more modern concept of brand. So here we have positioning theory. So let's look at some of the key papers, seminal papers that have considered positioning theory. So this is actually Kapferer's model of the positioning of rhombus. In 2004, it's in his book Strategic Marketing Management, and he here proposes looking at position from very much a product brand perspective, and he suggests it involves 2 steps. Firstly, categorising, and secondly, sort of justification of the continual presence of brand within the marketplace. And this process is sort of based on 4-question model, which identifies competitors' promise, target and usage. However, the framework is very much criticised by a number of academics, Van Riel and Balmer in 1997, and Tavisan, Muzakato and Koshasan in 2008, as really being unsuitable within the context of corporate brand positioning, as it fails to recognise the importance of identity. In response to this, these guys identified their own strategic brand positioning model from the resource-based perspective. This approach considers corporations could access current products in the context of market opportunities and subsequently align the strategies accordingly. Thus, the strategies could depend on the desired market position and the product category. Whilst this model is insightful, it's quite narrow in its application due to the context in terms of product brand positioning strategies. And also, again, it doesn't recognise the importance of personality. Similar to Kapfer, the concept of identity has sort of become paramount, and though it's discussed, it doesn't really feature in this model. The second group of models that sort of identified are from a semiotic perspective, and the semiotic scale was developed over time and goes back to about 1979 by Gramus, Cortez in 1979, Flock in 1983, sort of using very principled typologies. And these are the sort of utilitarian and existential values that develop from a narrative of symbiotics in terms of the life values, which are existential, utopian and mythical. And finally, the practical values. A number of academics, including Chevalier and Maslow, highlight this type of analysis involves kind of quite structured stories that a brand can use to represent a micro-universe of meaning. They do criticise it, however, and say that due to the nature of the model, it can really offer any exhaustive analysis, and though it does have its constraints, it has provided sort of in-depth perception into those that are neglected within traditional marketing tools. This symbiotic was developed into the Semiotic Map by Andrea Semproni, and it basically introduces a two-dimensional graph with an ordinate axis displaying sort of the most practical to the most utopian, and a coordinate axis which considers the most critical to the most diversionary. And the map, sort of due to its spatial continuity and ability to plot those positioning in comparison to its competitors, is considered to be more effective than the semiotic square. However, Chevalier and Maslow highlight that semiotic square is more flexible and versatile as it is infinite in its combination of focuses. The model sort of developed into perceptual mapping, which is widely used today within marketing to explore the market structure, products and communication strategies. Whereas perceptual mapping is considered to have sort of theoretical flaws, it has been empirically proven to be inferior than factor analysis in terms of its predictability, managerial interpretability, but an easy use. The model has remained absolutely dominant with practitioners and researchers alike. The difference being, though, is the axes are changed to maybe be price and design led, and you would plot where you are on that map and where your competitors are on that map. So that definitely is something that you possibly could use to assist you in showing your positioning for your brand in comparison to your competitors. In terms of corporate brand positioning, Knox and Bickerton in 2003 suggest this model here, which is very much developed from the perspective of corporate branding. It was part of a pilot study which sort of identified 4 stages that comprise of the organisational attributes, the performance, the portfolio, the network benefits. And this model highlights the added complexity of positioning within the corporate brand context. And whilst it suggested that this framework kind of develops positioning beyond the product brand concept, it neglects a critical element of that, of identity again. So these are some of the areas that you could consider when positioning your brand. However, be aware of what is used, be aware of what works best on the slides. So let's consider the second part of the lecture, which is the marketing strategy. So the definition and history of marketing. Kotler, very well known obviously within marketing theory, says that the marketing concept holds that the key to achieving organisational goals lies in determining the needs and wants of the target market and delivering the desired satisfaction more efficiently and effectively than the competitors.